welcome back to a new episode of the Threshold Lab. We're continuing conversations with coaches across different sports, different spaces, talking a little bit about their approach to leadership, the inner game of coaching, how they build culture, and so on. So a lot of different layers. And today's guest is Coach Alan Bratton. He's the head men's golf coach. I'm sorry, at Oklahoma State University. And I'm really excited for this conversation because not only of the success that he's had since taking over the program as the head coach, but all the success that he's had along the way, even going back to being a player in OSU's. A student athlete in OSU's program. So really excited to have you, Coach Bratton, today, and thanks for taking some time to be on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And always happy to talk OSU and just how to try to be great.
I think I'd be remiss if we didn't kind of spend a little bit of time here on the front end talking about your recent national championship. This was your second as the head men's golf coach in the program, and now that you're a few months removed from that national championship, now that the dust has settled just a little bit, talk to us a little bit about what are some of the things that you've learned from this past season or that stand out to you the most now that the dust has settled?
Well, the dust never really seems to settle. You know how coaching is. You roll right into summer recruiting, and then, gosh, we leave tomorrow for the first event of the new year. But one thing I've personally tried to do since that time is I have been fortunate to be a part of lots of successful teams, and that's certainly the expectation around here. And it's really easy to take that for granted, or to just move on. Well, we want another one, or whatever that might be. So I've made definitely a conscious effort to try to make sure and celebrate that the way it's deserved. Make sure that while Oklahoma State has won 12 national championships, that was the first one for these kids on our team. So you need to make sure they enjoy that, understand that you work for that. It is special. Certainly in golf, college golf's really the only time you get to be a part of a team. There's Ryder Cup teams, or we have two guys that'll play on the Walker Cup here in a little over a week, but those are teams for just 1 week. I think those guys understand, and as we came together as a group last year, recognized the value in sacrificing for your teammates and all that kind of stuff. So it's exciting to think going forward how we can build on that, because we had a young group and everyone's back, but now maybe where we sit at the start of the year for sure is different, because we certainly have a target on our back this year, and expectations are no different from within our program, but the expectations from outside are certainly different than they were at the start of last year.
One of the things that I've had conversations with in other coaches is that sometimes expectations, yes, they can come internally, but oftentimes expectations will come from a lot of outside sources. And internally, it's important to be really clear on standards, the things that you feel like are the bedrock or the foundation for your program, and especially a program like OSU, where the tradition and legacy of it goes back decades now. And I've heard you reference that tradition a lot in kind of past interviews and conversations. So I would be kind of curious as a starting point to hear a little bit about what it's like for you to kind of carry the torch in a program that not only you played for and you were an All-American for, but how important it is for you to connect that legacy and that tradition to your current student athletes.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, and hopefully that's a draw in recruiting, that people want to come and be a part of a tradition-rich program like we have. I talk about all the time how we're sort of standing on the shoulders of all the players that came before us, and that's a big responsibility, and that starts with me and all of our coaches, to hold that standard and get the kids to understand that once you come here, you haven't arrived, you haven't done anything, you just have an opportunity to benefit from things that have happened here before. But that comes with, again, you've got to be competitive, you've got to be a team guy, I think being humble is a big part of that because nothing's guaranteed. But if you look around and take advantage and listen and talk with and take advantage of the resources that we have around, which the most important resources is people. We have nice facilities and all that kind of stuff, but every school has an adequate access to good golf courses and things like that. But we have all these people that have done a lot of the things that these kids want to do. So take advantage of listening, learning, take a little bit of what maybe meshes with you, and then just believe in what's possible. And golf is great that way. If you're good enough, they can't keep you out. It's not like another sport where someone has to give you permission to join a team or be drafted or whatever it might be. So um, certainly we'll talk about what we want to achieve, and then it's just the day to day, like you said, taking care of all the little things that make you successful.
Beyond just the language and those conversations that you have about the tradition and the history that's there, what are some either rituals or traditions that you've created to kind of intentionally kind of help new players understand the program's history and kind of get them connected into the culture?
Well, we're fortunate that we own our golf course. Um, we raised the money while I was playing here, built the facility, so we have a lot of controls, and but also on the walls in the building, we honor a lot of that tradition. So the kids are walking past that every day, and so I encourage them to not just let it become decoration. They're no different than these guys that came before them. You're sharing stories about maybe their first weeks of school. We have two new freshmen this year. I think you start from the beginning again, connecting them with whoever that might be, whether it was Victor or Ricky or Matt Wolf, Austin Eckrow, all the way back to Bob Tway or Scott Plank or myself. So I think that starts even in the recruiting process, sharing that stuff, but certainly when they arrive. And then obviously we're fortunate now to kind of have a veteran team. We have a bunch of juniors, and a senior that have been a part of the program, and they start to pass down those standards and little things that just how we do things. So I think our guys do a good job of that. They're excited to try to get their pictures on the wall and set about doing the things that make you great. And it's important to talk about those things every day as leaders, because I think what you talk about, what you dream about, what the way you think, certainly your team, um, should be paying attention and follow that, and it matters.
Well, you mentioned there just the value of connecting them to the history and the legacy of so many different players that have come through the program. And you mentioned having two new players that are coming into OSU's program for this season. So if we were to kind of put ourselves in their shoes and what they might be experiencing as they transition in, what's it look like for a new recruit, a new player to walk into OSU's program and kind of get installed, not just on the history, but like the culture, what standards you believe in and stuff? How do you walk through new players, or how do you walk new players through that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that takes some time. We're only a weekend, but and then we go straight from I was caddying for one of our players at the U.S. Amateur, got home Sunday, school starts Monday, and then we leave tomorrow. So we're 9 days in, and we're already leaving for a tournament, which is a little bit unusual. Normally, we would have a weekend where we go maybe to a destination, and you start getting to know your teammates a little bit, things like that. But a lot of it is me getting to know them as well. But we start with standards of, hey, we're going to go to class. Remember who you're representing our brand every single day, and try to get them to understand what that means. That we take care of the little things, whether that's taking your hat off when you sit down indoors, again, being on time, um, you know, going to class, simple things but that you can't take for granted. This is the way we do things. Those things are important. I don't have tons of team rules, but that's a couple of things. We're gonna uh, be respectful of everybody just because we own the facility here, but the way you treat people is important. And again, I think that starts with little respectful, old school sort of things like take your hat off when you're sitting down for a meal, or the way you talk with people. All those kind of things you start to implement with your players, because you know all those little things add up, right? Every big deal starts as something small. So not every small thing becomes a big deal, but every big deal started as something small. So I know all that stuff's cliche, but it matters. And we when we practice, we hit our own golf balls. We go and pick them up. There's an accountability too. You're not just mindlessly whacking balls all over the place. We're going to clean up the locker room. All those kinds of things that again I think are just a respect, but it's again a tip to the tradition and understanding what that Swingin' Pete logo means out in the world, and that's a great place to start.
I like that you mentioned respect there as kind of one of those kind of core values or standards. And I think what you described is respect on a few different levels. It's respect towards the program and how you and the rest of the staff go about cultivating that. Obviously, with the help of probably veteran players in the program, it's respect to your teammates, and the coaches and everybody that's involved personnel wise within the program. And then there's also this respect towards yourself as well, and just how you go about things, not just on the golf course, but also off of it as well, and how those two things start to blend into one another. And I think you mentioned the uniqueness of golf at the collegiate level, where yes, you're competing at an individual level, but you're part of a team. And that piece of it, we're probably going to spend a little bit more time talking about the individual perspective in this conversation. But one more that I wanted to ask about the program is I've heard you share just how many championships OSU has now won across all its eligible seasons, and how often you finished in the top five and in the majority of those. With that, when excellence has become such a standard in the program, how have you and the rest of the staff gone about trying to maybe prevent things like complacency or reignite urgency year after year to kind of help continue to build?
Yeah, I mean that's probably your biggest challenge of all. You know, Fortunately, I had great mentors and leaders to be around. I played for Mike Holder. He was great um, at not being afraid of conflict. Uh, Certainly set the example that it's not like you hold your players to one standard and you're to another. If I'm late, I'm going to have the consequence the same as our team. Again, that's a small sounds like a small thing, but like I don't have to worry about my team being late. When you show up as a group, you're pointing out when you're late what a selfish thing that is, no matter what you had going. I mean, sometimes things come up, right? But for the most part, people just a lot of times they're careless with that. Well, that means the other five guys can't go do what they need to do. Selfishness and arrogance are huge pet peeves for me. So we try to keep that out of the program because, again, yeah, we've won the championship last year. That doesn't allow us to take any strokes off next week when we play or at any event this year. And certainly the prior success of the program means nothing. Um, again, it doesn't guarantee. So I think that's important. As a leader, you're trying to do that. You don't always live up to that, but you're certainly striving for that. And that's good to allow your players to know that, hey, it's okay, but it's nothing personal. If you're late, we're going to go work out. You get a little stronger and you got a reminder of something that's not so pleasant. And I'm the same. I've got to hold myself to the same thing. So we do little things when we arrive at a tournament. We always want to, so many times when we play, everybody arrives at the same time, and we're going to put our bags and everything out of the way. We're no more important than anyone else. I think that's just an important lesson that helps you throughout life, and certainly I think helps build that team deal in that, hey, we're going to try to do things to the highest level. let's stay out of people's way, be respectful, humble, and at the end of the day, if we do things right, uh, we ought to be holding the trophy by the end of the week. But it starts with little things like that. If we start thinking we're too important, again, that's a great sign that you're getting complacent. Um, at the same time, if we put in the work, then we're going to go have some fun, compete hard. Hopefully, there's no greater compliment than someone to say that your team is tough, you get everything out of the day, and that's obviously what we're striving for at the end of the day.
You've mentioned now the importance of those little things, but also how important it's for you to model some of those things. And I think part of this conversation, I was really excited to just hear a little bit about kind of what your journey has been like, growing into a leader, growing into not just a coach, but the head coach role. And so you spent 7 seasons as an associate head coach for the men's and women's program before you became the head coach. So, and when you started that, it wasn't too far removed from your own competitive playing career. And so, as you now reflect back on that journey and that transition into coaching for you, what kind of helped you make that transition from competing as an athlete to now coaching and leading?
Well, I would fall back that I had a wonderful mentor in Mike Holder that I played for. I thought, he did a great job. I tell people all the time the thing that I learned at Oklahoma State was I had an example of excellence in front of me every day. He was working out harder than us. He was practicing harder than us. And he wasn't afraid to go against the grain. The world might be saying one thing, but he had you aspiring to uh, maybe something greater. One of those examples was when I was in college. The tour had a lot of depth, and people were starting to say there weren't very many guys that were winning multiple times in a season. And they were starting to say that the tour was too good, too deep. You couldn't dominate it anymore. And coach was telling us someone's going to come along and show you that you can. And why can't you win the Grand Slam? Why can't you do those things? And that's very much how he coached. As much as he was really on us and wasn't throwing out compliments all the time, he was a hard ass. But he also was speaking into you just to believe in yourself, dream big, all those things. And the golf course that I get to go to work at every day, Karsten, that again, I said we fundraised and did, I got to see that. Like if you dreamt something and worked, you could make it happen. And I was watching that happen. And then again, true to what he said, along came Tiger Woods and, showed the world that you could dominate the way that he did. So for me, I had great leaders like that. I always enjoyed trying to help my teammates. I love team sports. I played other sports before I played golf. So that was really fun for me. And I played better for Oklahoma State than I did just for myself. And so when I thought about careers, obviously I wanted to be a professional golfer and do that forever. And I was fortunate I got to do that. I did make it to the PGA Tour, but I was not a good uh, professional golfer. Who knows why? The easy solution is I just wasn't good enough. That's the easiest answer and a factual answer because if you are good enough, you make it. Um, there's some things I probably would have done different now, but regardless, like when I thought about things I could do, college coaching was something I thought I would enjoy and I would be good at. And I've been fortunate to get to do that. So I guess it was 4 years, maybe a little over 4 years or right at 3 years from when I stopped playing to when I got into coaching. And I've been blessed ever since. And even the previous job that I had, I worked at Ping for 3 years in the tour department and got a different perspective on some of the best players in the game and learned a lot. I learned a lot about equipment, but even more importantly, certainly for my coaching career, I observed a lot of great players from a different perspective, from kind of a service role and obviously taking the emotion out of trying to compete against those players, observing them in a different role. And that served me well as I've tried to be a mentor to our players over the years.
What were some of the maybe personal qualities or characteristics for you from being a competitor that you think helped set you up to then make that transition into being a coach?
Um, I was a smart player. I understood how to, and I'm very competitive. Probably, maybe don't wear that on my sleeve. Um, I'm not yelling things, and hopefully, I have some emotional control. But I figure out ways to win. When I play something, I want to win. That's the goal, right? Like, figure out how to do something and do it well. Um, and I'm pretty patient and calm most of the time. Again, my emotional control is pretty good. So patience is important as a leader, I think. Um, Certain types of players I relate well with. I always, over the years, try to get better at obviously having the ability to build a relationship and learn what buttons to push with your team. And that's truly what makes a really good coach, that then you can coach everyone. I'm fortunate to coach with a couple coaches that are good at that. Um, Donnie Dar, for one of our assistants, and Stratton Nolan, they both are good at getting to know people, maybe a little more of a chameleon in the way of being able to change their message. So I'm always striving to get better at that stuff, so you reach more kids, because you look back and gosh, you feel like you helped certain guys, and then you just missed on this other kid, and you wish you had more uh, options of messages or different ways of delivering that message to reach them and help them reach their potential.
You talk to a lot of coaches, and one of the things that's part of that development and maturation process in becoming a leader is wrapped around like clarity around your values, your beliefs, who you want to be as a leader, and then like a lot of what you're describing too is then your ability to model that and show that for your players. Because do as I say, not as I do, just generally doesn't work in leadership, just like it doesn't work in parenting and so on. For you, and you, when you reflect back on kind of those early years as a coach, what are things that you felt are what's something that you had to get maybe more crystal clear on early on in your maybe your leadership philosophy or approach, and how that maybe still shows up for you today?
Well, one thing that's changed, I was a assistant coach for the men and the women, mostly the men, but helped the girls as well for a stretch of time. And then I became the women's head coach for 2 years, and that really helped me. I I learned to probably be maybe a little more patient before you deliver a message. Maybe that's just because I was a little more sensitive because I was coaching women, where I might snap and just answer a guy. I was a little more guarded, um, and I really think that's helped me communicate better. I don't. I told the girls that I was just going to coach them how I thought a good player should be coached, not really seeing male female. But I was more, again, patient maybe in discipline, or would run things by our assistant coach, who was female, to say, hey, this is what I want to say. Is this what they're going to hear, to get her perspective? And I think that's helped me. I've kind of tried to take that same thing as I went back to coaching men. Uh, that maybe has adjusted, and I don't know if that's maybe with just kids changing over time, or maybe that's just a better way to communicate. I think I've become a better communicator. Sometimes, I mean, obviously, everybody's still, you're constantly trying to improve, and I definitely don't have all the answers, but I think I'm getting better over time.
Part of this, I would imagine, is things that are more inherent for you, things you described, kind of some of those personal characteristics and qualities like around like emotion regulation and things that have maybe always been a part of who you are. And yet some of these I'm sure have been things that you've had to develop. You've had to cultivate systems and routines and things to mature and to develop. So what are some maybe personal routines or habits that you've leaned on or leveraged that's helped you show up consistently for your players, maybe year after year?
Um, yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. I've probably, um, probably tried to let them lead me more. Again, you have to be guarded. You know, you may think you have the answers, and you've certainly seen it in other players, and you think, okay, this is how it's going to go, but you have to coach the individual. So I think you have to be really patient before you jump in with advice on their game or whatever it might be. I've gotten better at choosing those moments because you're always trying to build credibility, and you need to be right for that particular person as you go. But I've continued to use I tell our guys all the time that the decisions that I make, I try to use what's best for the long-term interest of our program as the number one driver, then the long-term interest of that particular season, that year's team, and then the long-term best interest of each individual player. And sometimes with young guys, it's hard to get them to maybe understand that. They tend to get wrapped up in today rather than looking long-term. So, but again, even with all of that, letting them lead, you know, like the freshmen that we have, they're coming into a new environment. You know, you don't have to jam things down your throat, but I think if you communicate and let them lead you as much as you're leading them, then you arrive at a pretty good place. So I've probably become more patient with that over time. That's helped be a better communicator.
We had a basketball coach that was on one of the previous episodes, and one of the things that we talked a little bit about is for him, his framework when it comes to delivering different types of messages or like having hard conversations at times with players is he goes through this kind of 3-point checklist. He's like, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? And does this need to be said by me right now? And it sounds like for you, kind of that latter in particular, like that timing that has become really important, which is the other message that I like to share is there's a principle, I've shared it on a previous episode about, we call it like the law of the frequency. And the law of the frequency says is you could have two radio stations playing the exact same message at the same time, but we can only tune in to one of those. So each person is going to have a certain station that they're most tuned to. Well, from a coaching standpoint, this is why having multiple coaches on staff be able to echo the same and different messages and things is because certain messages that you share may resonate with one player, and somebody else's message, they come in and say the exact same thing that you said, but now all of a sudden it maybe clicks for that person. Well, one of the ways in which sometimes that message can resonate more is when it's delivered at the right time. And it sounds like for you, that was obviously part of that, the kind of growth process.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Again, I love the way you said those 3 points. I mean, the timing is important. And again, it helped sometimes when I was coaching the women. I mean, you always want to talk to your team after the round or whatever. And there were times that it's like, you know what, it doesn't really matter what I say. It's not going to be heard, or it's going to draw a tear or whatever it might be. So you just put it off, and that's okay. But yeah, I like that. That's great. Wisdom from the coach that said that about those 3 things again. You know, obviously, lots of messages need to be delivered, but by whom and at what time is kind of up for grabs, and you have to learn your players and read the room, all those things. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna steal that one from you. Thanks for sharing.
of course. Yeah, of course. Please steal away. Maybe kind of building off of that a little bit, you talked a little bit about this, both in addressing the individuals, but also in teams. When you reflect on your coaching career, has there been a moment or a time where maybe you felt like you had to have what we'll call a courageous conversation or a courageous decision that maybe wasn't the most popular at the time for that person or the program, but you felt like you had to do it, and kind of maybe how you navigated that?
Uh, you know, there's times that we always have I mean, I don't know how courageous it was. It was just basically delivering on what he said, but recognizing, you know, sometimes with us, you know, as far as playing time, things like that, there's you play these qualifying rounds, and someone can put a number to what they shot, and you tell them, okay, we're going to play for 3 spots or 4 spots or whatever it might be. Where other sports, you use the point system, right? In baseball or whatever sport, and the point system meaning, okay, you're going to start, you're going to start. They can't really, but we have a sport where there's a number, right? That someone can say, wait a minute, why aren't you playing me? I just beat him. Well, he's better than you. Well, I beat him today. There's a number in a box that you're measured on in our sport that's not quite the same as a batting average or number of home runs or whatever, whatever sport it might be. So, there's been times when you have to maybe trust your gut. And again, I don't ever want to go against what we said. If we said we're playing for 2 or 3 or whatever, but one example would be for us, we hold our kids accountable to their grades. We don't take them to the first tournament in the spring. We always start in Hawaii, and you've got to have a certain grade point. You got to have a 3-point to get to go on the trip, no matter who you are. I don't care if you're returning All-American or whatever it might be. And we've done that. There's been times in years when a kid probably thought we weren't going to go by that because it was our best player, and we've left him at home. And I don't know I don't think that's really courageous. Sometimes you might feel foolish, but that's what you do. And most of the time, and many times, our team has gone and won the tournament, which is a great message for the kid you left at home and for his team, that they know, well, one, the guy that gets left at home, if you start thinking you're bigger than the program, or just because you're a good player, we're going to bend that standard, it's a good reminder for them. And then again, for the opportunity that somebody got to step into that role, and for a team to know, hey, we can succeed even without potentially our best player. That's great messages all the way around. And again, it's easy to get wrapped up in today's results and worry, oh, are we going to get thumped or whatever it might be. My second year as the head coach, I thought it was the right thing to do to we had a freshman player who was going to be one of our best players, and he played great in this qualifying that we had. And in fact, he won, but he was going to be missing the next week because of the World Amateur maybe. And if he went to this tournament, he was going to start off his college career missing a ton of school, an international student. And I didn't think that was going to get him off on the right footing. So fortunately, he understood. I didn't tell him on the front end, but afterwards I'm like, hey, I know you won this, but I'm going to leave you at home because I think you'll be too far behind in school. It's going to hurt you down the road. And our team did. So I ended up playing we had injuries and different things. It was a tournament where we got to play 6 players, and I just went with 5. And our team's performance was terrible. We finished last. But again, I stuck to what I thought were the values of trying to set your players up to succeed. And fortunately, that player, not every player would have understood, but we had the right kind of kid, and he went on and was a multiple-year All-American, and he's playing the PGA Tour now. So things like that, again, I think you stick to what you believe, and then you learn from it, here and there, and otherwise. Again, I don't know how courageous any of that was, but at least, you're trying to do the right thing.
Whether or not we want to define that as courageous, I think it speaks to earlier we've talked a little bit about how you define standards for your program. You've talked a little bit about how you've also tried to model the standards for your program. Well, the middle piece in all that too is how you manage those standards, which comes in the form of how do you uphold those things? How do you hold people accountable to them? How do you continue to ensure that those aren't just lip service and things that get spoken about but not, in essence, acted on? And so, whether or not it's courageous, it brings together all the different layers that it takes to kind of build this program that you've had. And so, maybe again, shifting off of courageous, maybe, but kind of in the same vein, part of coaching sometimes are these moments where you have to maybe kind of deliver the you have a crucial conversation and deliver a hard truth to somebody, right? And especially knowing that there might be instances where it can strain a relationship, or again, for different reasons, you're not sure if timing is right or the person is in a space to hear it. So for you, how do you approach delivering kind of those hard truths in conversations with your players and or your staff, and just kind of what that process is like for you?
Yeah, I mean, we get to do that quite often because, again, we travel less than our lineup, and you don't have, it's not like we get to put someone in for a certain amount of plays. So you're dealing those, at least in a small scale, are tough conversations for kids because you're choosing who's going to the events and who's not, because you either go or you don't go. There's not like, okay, well, you're going to play special teams this week as you try to become a starter, or you're going to get, you know, 10 minutes this week as a basketball team or whatever. You're either in or you're not. So we get to practice that quite a bit. And I think you know, you get kids to understand that, like, I'm a believer, and our guys can come in the right setting and talk to me and share about anything, basically, if they do it at the right time. If you want to come one on one and call me a son of a bitch, that's fine. And maybe there's times in front of the team that's okay too, but certainly I want to arm them with that freedom to come and say, hey, I don't agree. And then I try to, again, if it's a hard conversation that maybe we're going to deliver, something greater than that or whatever it might be in front of the group, I generally will do that one on one first. Give them a
Mm,
heads up that, hey, this is a preview of what we're getting ready to do, rather than, and dropping this on you in front of the whole group. Hey, here's your reasons why. And again, in front of the whole group, you may not need to give all the details of how you arrived at a decision, but in that one on one for someone so that they fully understand, that's been something that I've done more and more over the years as well, which I think is a respectful way to deliver that message. And then again, your emotions, and then what comes in front of the group, hopefully there's a clarity there rather than just dropping it on them. So there's a time when you need to, discipline someone in front of the group or whatever it might be. Um, and then again, I think there's times that, hey, this is coming, but let's do it one on one and, you know, hash things out. That's been successful for us in the past.
of course, yeah, yeah. With this, I want to kind of transition to the back end of this conversation, and we've talked a little bit about the program. We've talked about you and kind of your own growth and process as a leader. I'm really curious about the mental side of golf, because I find that our sports, baseball and golf, sometimes get paired up in different ways. Obviously, there's still certainly some unique variables and contextual things that make both challenging in their own ways. But one thing that I find so interesting for you in, like, let's say in a tournament, for example, like as a coach, like you can't monitor every hole for every player. And I'd imagine that seems like it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that because I haven't had that personal experience. So for you, when you're coaching in a tournament, how do you kind of decide what to focus on, and also maybe when and how to intervene kind of within those constraints?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that, again, in our sport, there's things that I'd like to change. Like, one of the frustrating things is exactly what you said. If you're coaching a baseball team, the manager sees every play of every game. Now, you may not be able to watch every single player at every single moment. You don't have that many eyes, but shoot, they probably have cameras on everybody where you probably can afterwards. At least you could get film and see how guys are moving and whatnot. But you know what's happening with the group all the time. Basketball, you're watching every play. Football, same thing. Our sport, you can't see the whole thing. You're spread out over a property, unless there are times, and I would love to see us do it more, where you pair your entire team together in a fivesome. We usually play five players, and you count the low four scores every day. I would rather play our five guys together because now I get a chance to see each kid. And even if you're just observing how they go about their process, you're seeing every shot. But that's rare that we do that. So our guys are paired in 5 different groups, so they're spread out. We're allowed 2 coaches to give advice while they're playing. So we generally pick a player and follow them for the entire round because you get the depth of I've seen every shot, I know their thoughts. We're having conversations. You can direct their thoughts. If they're emotional, you can help get them back on track. You're teaching them, you're directing their thoughts with that walk between shots. Pitching and golf is very similar. You're in
Hmm.
control. You've got a lot of time to think. If the ball's coming at you and you're at the plate, you don't have near the time to think. You get to react. You have the time in between, so there's a similarity there. But pitching, I think, and then hitting a golf ball are very similar. So the mental processes you have to go through to know the situation, what's called for, and there's lots of variables in golf. That's one thing that's different than a lot of sports. A perfect free throw goes in every single time. You can execute a golf shot perfectly, and you misjudge the wind or the ball. We're putting on imperfect surfaces, all those kinds of things. So we try to do the best job we can. Again, I like to, rather than bounce between holes with a particular player, that gives an impression, it can, that, oh, this shot's more important than another one if all of a sudden the coach is there. I'd much rather walk with a particular player. Then I don't have to say, hey, Zach, after the round, the way we learn is, hey, what happened over there on that hole? I saw you, had this. And sometimes you get the truth, sometimes you don't. If we're walking with a player, even if you didn't say anything to them, I've seen every shot. I have a hint of how they lost their composure or how one mistake led into another, things like that. So hopefully you're helping them prepare as best you can. And then while you're actively coaching them, which would be walking with them, basically caddying without carrying the clubs, you're trying to help them step into every shot with as much confidence as they can. You're not trying to keep them from making mistakes. You're just trying to help them execute that plan as best they can, and then ultimately teaching them to do that when they're out there just all by themselves. Um, and you start to learn their capabilities. It's good to, you may know they're getting ready to make a mistake. Sometimes they prove you wrong, but they're definitely going to learn more if they do make the mistake. And then you can go, well, you see, you know, you misjudged that. You couldn't hit it over that tree. How about, was there a better way to go about it that then ultimately leads to a lower score? So hopefully that answers the question. But I mean, that's one of the uniqueness to golf is, again, so many variables to learn out there because no 2 golf shots are exactly the same. Where and the situation changes. Every single free throw is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the situation. So again, in basketball, if you just use free throws, that you every one is the same. You can close your eyes and shoot it if you want. They're all the same, but the situation changes. Our situations change, but then also no 2 golf shots are exactly the same. They're a little bit different lie, a little different wind. Obviously, the courses change, things like that. But I've always thought pitching and golf, that mental pre-pitch routine or pre-shot routine should be very similar. Um, and your preparation for the golf course, I suppose, would be the scouting of the hitters and situations and things like that. That you've got to pull up the right timing and then trust and just let it go.
It's probably no surprise that we have a lot of pitchers in particular who love to golf and love to like that is so much, and sometimes it worries me because you already think of how taxing and challenging baseball is. So then they go and play another sport that can be just as challenging. But I know for so many of them, it is this really healthy release, and we have this we have a coach who he's a hitting coach, but one of the things he talks about, he's like, I view every hitting coach as an assistant hitting coach. Every player needs to be their primary coach. In other words, like, I'm not with you in the box, I'm not with you on the mound, and so on. Much like you are not with every golfer for every step of the way. So it's imperative that people learn how to self-adjust, self-correct, coach themselves in the moment, and so on. But you mentioned there are moments where you've maybe had conversations or you've had to step in and intervene and share. So could you think back on maybe has there been a moment or one that stands out to you where maybe you stepped in to coach somebody and you felt like it made a difference for that player?
Oh, I mean, I think there's lots of them. One that I'm very
Yeah.
proud of is Matt Wolf. When we won the championship in 2018, uh, he needed to. I guess he just had to tie the hole for us to win. The kid he was playing was on the 15th hole here at our golf course, par three. Matt had maybe a 15 footer for birdie, and his opponent was maybe 8 feet for birdie. So um, and tons of people around. I mean, if he wins this hole or ties this hole, we're going to win the match. And just as I'd done all day, I just kind of leaned in and reminded him, "Hey, you're going to putt this just like it's the first hole of the day. That's really all you can do. Is you've read your putt. You know, it's time to just let things go. You've done everything you can do to make it. So it's just like it's the first putt of the day. No more important than anything else." And I wasn't even sure if he heard me, but he parroted that back afterwards. He did make the putt, which closed out his guy and clinched the championship for us. So that was a proud moment for me that he did listen. You know, you never know what you're saying to help in that moment when someone's getting ready to ultimately win, and that can be a distraction in itself, right? Because this is you see people double fault on a serve or whatever it is when it's something to win, and that was a proud moment that he said that in interviews. Coach told me this. That helped me have the freedom to go let it go.
At the beginning of our conversation, you brought up one of the challenges is when you come off of a season like last year or have even individual success, you have a target on your back. And in essence, there are moments, whether it's on a team level or maybe on individual levels, where there's a difference between being the hunted versus being the hunter, if you will. For you, what are ways that you've found that have been useful to coach players to thrive maybe in both roles? So when they're kind of leading in the final round, we'll say, versus trying to pitch a comeback and chase down the leaderboard.
Yeah, I think that's again something that you're training them all the time. I heard an interview with Scotty Scheffler where he talked about this. I shared it with my team the other day. Um, he just talks about how he leans back on his preparation. Again, it's cliche, everybody says it, and it's hard to do, but you know, I've always treated competition as your reward. I definitely have talked about the national championship being that, and I learned that on my own. I redshirted as a freshman because I wasn't good enough to beat the guys on my team. When I came to Oklahoma State as a freshman, I was a good player. I was one of the best freshmen in the country, but we had a very, very good team, a veteran team, much like the team that we have now. I came into a group that was a bunch of returning All Americans, and so I wasn't good enough to beat them consistently. And fortunately, my coach didn't play me in one or two events because if you hit one shot, that costs you a year of eligibility. So by the time the next year, I did get to play the national championship. I'd been waiting for that for 2 years. You only get 4 shots at it. So I smartly told myself, hey, this is my reward. I've been working towards this. No matter what, this is going to be a good week. Like nothing's going to get in the way of this being a good week for me. And we ended up finishing third at the championship, which was a good performance. That was probably about as good as our team could do that year. And I had a good individual week. I think I finished 15th. So, which again was a quality finish. And I kind of leaned on that each year. And I've tried to take that same approach with our team of, you practice under pressure, you're putting them in, uh, you know, moments where they're stressed in practice so that the competition is the easy part, right? So I think that's important. That's it's the reward. You're prep. You're either ready or you're not, and then you go and compete give yourself a chance to get out of your own way. And again, there's lots of strategies and different things that you're preaching all year and hopefully instilling in your guys. And then as we choose as coaches with who we're going to walk with all year long, we're trying to figure out who we can be most effective. What's the best way to coach this team as we get to ultimately where you'd like to be. So I think that's a hard one. I mean, that's just an everyday, you welcome those expectations and you try to direct their thoughts each day. If you see them starting to, a finish that they used to be pleased with before, now just because of the expectation, that's a big hurdle to overcome. So, yeah, I mean, it's a constant. You're always evaluating, and if they're not taking care of their preparation, you got to hammer them on it and make sure that they are. And yeah, we'll see how we do with it this year.
Yeah. You mentioned sharing the clip of Scotty Scheffler. I've joked with our staff internally that we could probably teach an entire master class on the mental game by just pulling different quotes and sound bites and things from him. And also OSU's program has certainly had a long list of guys, some of which you've already referenced on this call. So for you, when you think to some of those other guys that have gone on to have exceptional careers beyond Oklahoma State, for you all, what were some of the things, the skills and or characteristics that you saw from them, that you've seen from them, that have helped them maybe separate themselves? Are there maybe specific ones that jump out, maybe just beyond just the obvious like physical ability?
Yeah, I had a kid from another team ask me a number of years ago because we have had a lot of guys go on to success at the next level, and they've, especially in the last 10 years, we've had guys transition quickly to success. And they've asked why that is. And the two most common traits that I've found that I shared is one, they love the game. I mean, if you're going to do any sport professionally, you better love the grind of that every day. I mean, again, it's all this stuff sounds so cliche, but it's true. Like it, I mean, a lot of the everyday, I mean, you're doing the boring things over and over, the fundamental things. Like you got to love being out there and being with your teammates. So that's one, love of the game. And then two, you have to be confident enough to be coached. Your lesser players tend to, it's that whole, I don't know if it was, what's his name? I'm blanking on the NBA coach that I saw. Maybe this was quoted too, where the greatest players want to know the truth, right? Your lesser players, just want to be left alone, maybe, and or they get defensive or whatever. Your best players are confident enough to say, "Hey, this is something I struggle with. I don't want to struggle with it. Can you help me?" And that's been an absolute common trait that I've seen for sure. And it takes a confidence to be coached. They're usually the ones that are the most coachable. So not that they just take everything you say and blindly go about it, but they certainly aren't afraid to be a little vulnerable to say, I got to get better at this. And Scotty's a great example of that. And he was a dominant junior golfer. He was not a dominant collegian. But he has obviously become the number one player in the world. And a big part of that is the relationship that he has with his caddy. As soon as Ted Scott started to caddy for him, however they work together, whatever he pours into him, the guy's invincible. And it's awesome to watch some of the things. I mean, the guy got arrested before a round and then went up and put up an unbelievable round. That's unprecedented. And he never leaned on his name to try to get out of that. I mean, what a master class in mentality from just that day. Amazing.
You've touched earlier in the conversation, just being able to manage your emotions and things. I can only imagine what emotions and thoughts were spiraling for him in that given moment that morning. And how he responded to it. I mean, again, there's so many lessons we could probably draw from him about teaching the mental game. I want to bring us to the kind of last two questions here, again, being kind of sensitive to your time, but we've talked a little bit about, a couple of those characteristics that you just described that have started to separate guys. You've talked a little bit about the different strategies and tools maybe in the moment that you've seen players or you're trying to help players navigate. How about when you've had a player that's gone through an extended struggle period, like an extended, let's say, a season-long slump, where like, because there's a lot of instances where a player is putting in a lot of work, a lot of good work, and yet
Mhm.
sometimes you're not rewarded. Like the game doesn't always reward you. What's an example of that maybe that comes to mind for you, and what did you try to help that player kind of focus on going through that stretch day to day?
Yeah, I mean that's hard when you see someone that is putting in the work, um, and wants it bad. They're doing all the right things. Um, Obviously, the biggest barrier to most mental people is they get too wrapped up in the results, right? So there's ways of trying to go about that. I've had them with our sport. A lot of times when someone's doing that, it's they can't find the golf course. They can't keep it in front of them. So you can practice. I think that freedoms of things like not even aiming at something, just you know, don't even look out there. You got to just get to what's right in front of you and hit the ball solid. Get down to those most simple terms, and that's a feeling you get of freedom of okay, can I care less? I mean, people always say that. Well, don't care so much. Well, you can kind of practice that, and then you can take that to the golf course. That's little strategies that maybe click. I read a great book on the mental game a long time ago called The Inner Game of Golf. Tim Galloway wrote it. It's got a lot of uh, great advice in there. There's some little things like that. So you just keep trying to come up with things that'll let that person divorce themselves from the result of the shot, um, and hopefully free up their mind, and then start to do that when there is something on the line and just grow it from there. I mean, that's a hard one though. But yeah, how do I practice trying less when you care so much? But there's ways to do that, and again, one of those is, uh, if you have somebody turn around and hit it into the ocean or into a lake, any quality player, they almost always hit a great shot because they're not worried about where it's going. Like you can't miss the target. So the whole aim small, miss small, sometimes you need to not aim at anything and start breaking things down from there. That's been pretty successful, I think. Um, yeah, so that's the best example in a simple way for me. And then you start to chip away at it, but maybe they get that sense of freedom in a moment like that, see some successful shots, and then you've got a chance to start to build on that.
Yeah, that word freedom really hits home in terms of when you start to distance yourself or remove some of that care factor that you have in the results. Like what's left over is a little bit more peace, a little bit more freedom for you to just go and like not get in your own way. I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm sure it's similar in golf, where same with baseball, where the players that you always have a lot of empathy for are the ones that you see kind of getting in their own way by what's happening internally for them. And I like how you've shared, not just in that example, but some others prior in the conversation of just ways in which you've tried to shift focus, and remind them, putting in perspective. I even think back to the one you brought up of and I think you said it was with Matt Wolf talking about that putt in that morning, hey, reminds just like the first putt of the day, just little things that keep things in perspective, which is so easy to lose when you're not being rewarded and performance doesn't equate to the work that you're putting in. So, and that brings me kind of now to the last question. I ask every coach that I've had on here this final question. It's a little different, but I wanted to ask, What's something, Coach Bratton, that you're proud of that maybe you don't always get an excuse to talk about?
Uh, that's a good question. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm proud of, again, that I think I've put into action. Like, again, when we hosted I think I mentioned on Mike Holder teaching me that to go against the grain of maybe the way the world thinks. For example, um, getting your kids to embrace. When we hosted in 2018, we had a really good team. We were hosting, and everybody all year long wanted to talk about the pressure of that. No different than this year, the pressure of, okay, we return everybody off of a championship team. Well, why wouldn't you want that? All we talked about all year was the opposite of that, the advantage of, wow, we're going to get to perform in front of a home crowd for the fact that we were hosting. I've never heard a NFL team not try to gain home field advantage. In what sport do you not try to do that? But people love to, especially in our sport, talk then about all the pressure of playing at home or these expectations. Like, you want that. What a compliment that people think that. So I'm proud of the fact that I think we speak that way. Um, one example that I've used as well of another way that I think we had a year where I think there were three guys. The PGA Tour qualifying tournament, there's four stages, and there were, I think, three guys that made it through all four stages that year at the finals, and they were all guys that played at Oklahoma State, every one of them.
Mm.
And I've told them for years, and you've probably heard this. I assume you're familiar at least a little bit that there is a qualifying tournament they call Q School. That's how you get to the tour, right? And people have told you there's a lot of pressure there, right? Everybody wants to talk about that. Oh my gosh, there's so much pressure. Well, the point of getting to the PGA Tour, if you want to get to the PGA Tour, you must think that you can compete on the PGA Tour. So if you think that, the people that you have to beat in the qualifying, they're not on the PGA Tour. So if you think you can beat the people that are, why wouldn't you think you could beat the people that aren't? So the world's not telling, most of the world isn't saying that. They're like, oh my God, it's so hard. And again, to win the national championship, people make it out like, oh, it's hard. Brooks Koepka has some great references to that about how a lot of the field at a major, our major is the NCAA championship, at a major on the PGA Tour, some of the people just aren't good enough to win it. Some of the people don't think they can. Some of the people think they have to elevate their play somehow and have a great week to win it. So it really whittles down the field to where there's not nearly as many people you have to beat. So I take a lot of pride in that kind of messaging that, sure, you have to respect the game, but if you're prepared and you're good enough, you're going to make it. Simple. And again, golf is that way. The other sports, you might have been good enough to make it in the big leagues, but somebody said you're too short, too small, too slow, too whatever, or you're in the wrong organization and maybe you're backing up Derek Jeter as the shortstop for the Yankees you better get traded. You're not going to replace him. Our sport, if you can put up the number, they can't keep you out. So if you get that mentality instilled, well, then that allows you to be like Scotty Scheffler. I think it empowers you to just lean back on your preparation. And when you're ready, these things are going to happen. So hopefully that instills that freedom to, when it's my turn, I'm going to be ready. And if I'm not, then I go back to work. But when I am, then I'll arrive. So I'm proud of that message. We've consistently delivered that. I think that's empowered our teams to succeed. And then when they leave here, go out there into the world of professional golf and be able to transition quickly and then sustain it for a career.
On one hand, what's great about what you just shared is the acknowledgement of the objective side of it, right? Like that if you take care of the performance of itself, like nobody else can say anything different. Like you're going to create opportunities for yourself to compete. But you also hit on something there of the subjective side, which is about your internal belief and making sure that that is on par or aligned with who you see yourself becoming and like the version of you that you want to have. And the phrase that we'll have used at times with players is the idea that you can't outperform your self-image. So if your self-image is here but you ultimately aspire to have performance at this level, like it's going to be hard to sustainably ever reach that point. And so just that importance of you having that as a foundation as a player, but then the work that you and the coaching staff have done to not only instill and empower players with those beliefs, but also then to kind of keep that in perspective along the way. I think that's a really wonderful example.
Yeah, I'm a big believer. I was fortunate. Someone turned me on to, there's a guy named Brian Kite who I think is really good. He has this equation, E plus R equals O, the event plus the response equals the outcome. And I think that's a genius, kind of applies to every area of your life. And the real genius in that is, okay, you can't control events. Things happen to you. You hit a ball out of bounds, you get sick, you get fired, or whatever it might be. That's the event. And, you know, even back to communicating with our players, the real thought of what's the outcome that you want, make sure you keep that in mind before you respond.
Mhm.
And golf is such a great teacher of that. You get it every day. Like, again, you've got this event. Okay, where do I want the outcome to be? This is going to be my response. I use that every day. I try to teach it to my children and to our team. And I just think that's a super simple little equation. Along with, in the book that I mentioned before, The Inner Game of Golf, he also put your performance to an equation, which was your performance is whatever your capabilities are minus interference,
Mhm.
whatever that might be. So, you practice to improve your physical capabilities and all those kind of things, but you have to work on your ability mentally to block out whatever a distraction might be. And it's amazing how so many times a distraction or interference is something positive. You're getting ready to win, you're getting ready to uh, shoot your career low round, whatever that might be. Um, you know, and all of that dictates what your ultimate result's going to be every day. So I lean on those things a lot. Those two equations are something that I try to, obviously I read them and borrowed it from other people, but I've tried to live that way and model that for our players, and hopefully they get that. And I've seen that help me succeed as a player and absolutely as a coach.
Mhm. It's a perfect way to bring our conversation to a close. I resonate with both of those examples. One, The Inner Game of Golf is also a wonderful book. I know The Inner Game of Tennis, the other version is obviously very big in our circle, and obviously Brian Kite and I think his dad Tim obviously have done some exceptional work in helping different teams and stuff build culture. And that E plus R equals O, like we love to talk about that internally too, that you can't always control events, but you can always control your response within those events. So Coach Bratton, I appreciate you just taking some time. I know the season is kicking off here, and as we mentioned at the beginning, there's no such thing as a really a down period at times for being a collegiate head coach. So I'm grateful for your time and your reflections, and excited to see how the you all defend to the last year's title.
Yeah, it's a great goal here. It's hard to find things to the good that haven't been achieved at Oklahoma State, and one of those things, however, is we haven't in our history been able to win one back to back. We've been close lots of times. We've gone first and then second, or so. That's exciting to again have that to shoot um, for our guys and as a coaching staff. So we've got a great group. They like each other, um, and now they know how to get it done. That's I think a really powerful. And again, it's wow when you think you can do something. That's one thing. When you know you can do something,
Mm.
that's really powerful. So hopefully we use that power to our advantage and we're ready come the end of the year.
Yeah, yeah, the pressure is an advantage for sure. I like to share pressure only finds the worthy, and it's a good reminder that of all the work that you put in, everything that you've achieved already, like if you're in a pressure situation, it's because you've earned it, and it can be very much viewed as an advantage as you talked about. So again, I just want to thank you, and I'm looking forward to following the team as you all transition into the new year.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and happy to do it anytime.